right, everyone. Welcome back to the show. This is Race to the Finish, and my name is Carlos. I'm here with my friend Amy Kato, and she's coming onto the show for the second time. You know, you probably didn't hear her on the first iteration, but on this iteration of the show, this will be her first time, and I'm sure she'll be here, here in the future. Amy, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, my name is Amy Kato, as Carlos said, and I graduated also from John Carroll University. And I've spent the past year traveling and traveling, studying for exams, applying to stuff. And I'm going to talk about my experiences over the past year, particularly with the environment and environmental conservation.
Awesome. Cool. So how you been?
I've been good. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Oh my gosh. No, seriously, like graduating and stuff has been
A thrill.
a challenge just
Such a
because
blessing.
adjusting to like adult life and stuff has
Oh,
been
yeah,
crazy.
I haven't really been doing that, so it's been pretty like chill for me. But yeah, I get it.
Well,
Somewhat.
obviously because you've been traveling. No, seriously, like starting back up the show and stuff has been something I wanted to do for a while. So I remember
Right.
like back, was it in like March or something that we were talking? When I went to PAX and we were talking about like different topics,
Yeah.
particularly with like nerd culture and stuff. And that's when I was
Yes.
like, hey, like the show needs to like come
It
back,
needs to start back up.
and
Yeah.
right. And I wanted to bring you back just because I know that we have like these in-depth conversations and stuff about, many, many different topics, whether it be like
Hmm.
philosophy or like social issues and stuff like that. So,
Right.
you've been traveling a lot and I see that like on social media and stuff and like tell me about some of the places you've been traveling to.
So I've traveled to quite a number of places, but I guess you could group them into four major trips. I went to the Balkans in October, Egypt and Jordan in February, Australia and New Zealand in March. And sprinkled throughout that, I've been traveling also to around Malaysia. So that's where I'm
Wow.
from, by the way, for people who don't know. Yeah.
Mhm. That's cool. And so like why though? I mean like those are so many different places that you could go to. I mean like I imagine
Right.
that's a lot to take in.
Yes. So basically, I decided to take a year off between graduating and whatever the next step was going to be. I was extremely burnt out when I graduated, and honestly, I couldn't remember ever like having energy, like not having anxiety dreams, like the whole 9 yards of post
Mhm.
grad, like towards the end of your college time. And I did not want to start whatever was the next part of my life feeling that way. I knew I wouldn't be able to sustain myself for a long time. And so I took the year off. And when I took the year off, I thought, okay, I can take an internship, I can work, I can travel, I can do nothing,
Mhm.
and really like wing it. And I'm in a very privileged position to have like my family support, and I don't need to work. And so that really put me in a position of privilege to be able to decide, okay, I can do whatever I want to do. So what do I want to do? And I decided, okay, I want to travel because I'm interested in law, and I've been advised by a lot of people that once you start law school, you really have to like continuously move and work, and like the grind is endless.
Right.
So I thought, okay, there are places in this world that are easier to travel to and some less easy to travel to. Not impossible, but more difficult, especially from the US. And so, is it possible for me to just like visit those places? It doesn't have to be like really long journey, like months at a different location, but at least 2 to 3 weeks exploring a place, and maybe just like getting a surface understanding of it that will make my next trip there easier. Yeah.
Right. And I kind of think back to like some things that I was telling other people about traveling too, because I mean, I've done a fair amount of traveling myself, and most
Yeah.
of it has been because I've been in a privileged position to do so. I mean, traveling is not easy. You know, first of all, it
Right.
costs money to do so. You know, flights
Yeah.
are not cheap. You know, and then time and mental capacity. I mean, obviously,
Right.
like planning for a trip, going to a totally different country and being away from your
Yeah.
family is not something easy to take in. And I remember when I was a kid, I was taken to El Salvador, my parents' country, because I was
Yeah.
born here, and I wasn't exposed to that, but that was one of their goals that they wanted to do for me. And
Yeah.
I know that a lot of other folks who are Latinx, that are born here, don't have that opportunity to see what their home
Right.
countries are like, and I'm conscious of that, and I know that's a
Right.
privilege for me to see. So
Yeah.
ever since then, like I've always wanted to travel just to see other places too, and the other places I've been to, like Honduras and in Belize and Guatemala, all of those opportunities came because there was an opportunity for me to do so, not necessarily
Right.
at my own expense.
Right.
And I will never like ever put that aside, and I think that's very good at, like very, very, I don't know how to say it, like very honorable of you to say that, like, hey, it is a privilege for me to go somewhere else and see what different cultures are like. So like
Right.
what what
I don't think
go ahead.
it's so much sorry to cut you, but like I don't think it's so much honorable to say, but more of recognizing, that for a lot of people who are listening to this, maybe they think, oh, this girl, she gets to take the year off and travel, like,
Hmm.
she's a rich kid, she has like all this privilege, she's not acknowledging it. Like, I'm very aware of the fact that,
Yeah.
most people don't have this opportunity. And that's partly like that's part of the reason why I decided to do it. Because people who
Yeah.
look like me, people with my background generally don't do stuff like this.
Hmm.
You know, don't have the opportunity to do something like this. And so I thought, you know, when I travel, like when I go to a hostel, I'm sometimes the only brown face there,
Mm.
you know, in the whole like building. And or one of like the only people from Southeast Asia, or one of the only people who studied in Cleveland, like very odd intersections of my identity, like just come together, and I'm often one of the only people who looks or talks or seems like me in a
Hmm.
location. And I really want to not hide the fact that, you know, it's unusual, yes, and for a reason.
Yeah, and you're totally right. Yeah, honorable is kind of, yeah. Now that I think about it, it's kind of like putting you on a pedestal. It's like, hey, look at me, I have a
Yeah,
privilege, and I'm
right,
acknowledging it. Look at me, I'm
right.
great. Nah, yeah. So you're right. Yeah, that's not the right word. But like, but that's not to say that you didn't grow from this situation of like
I know, yeah.
going to travel and seeing different intersections of your personality or your identity coming together.
Mhm.
While you're at the hostel, while you're in a different country, or while you're in a different community. Like, tell me about that. Like, what
Yeah.
did it do for your personal growth?
Oh Jesus. It was it was a lot, because okay, so initially, um, my priority was traveling with my mother. Really like spending time with her, because I spent the last 4 years practically away from her. I had the opportunity to go home at least once a year, sometimes twice.
Hmm.
And I consider myself very, very lucky and privileged to be able to do that. Um, but I really miss just traveling with her. And when you travel, it's really different. It's not like being at home. It puts you in a situation where you really bond and grow and like learn about each other, because you have to talk a lot. Sometimes the Wi-Fi isn't good, so you really
Right.
gotta like get into those conversations.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, tell me about it.
yeah. And so those were most of my trips. Some of them I also took with other people in my family. But the one that I think, well, you grow differently when you're traveling with family versus traveling alone. Like when I went to Australia and New Zealand, I went alone. Of course, I visited friends in Australia and I got to stay with them. I was so incredibly blessed to have them in my life.
Yeah.
But when I was in New Zealand, I was alone, and it was really eye-opening experience, because I really learned, you know, a lot of where my boundaries are. Like there were people who said, now I don't have FOMO, fear of missing out, for in case this term really like gets out of trend, out of use, for the future listeners, I hope, of this show. Um, and so I realized, okay, do I rest because I'm exhausted after sitting 9 hours in a bus? Or do I go out and walk like 5 miles and come back
Mhm.
when it's dark and like be cold and hungry? And so I realized, there's some things that you can come back to, and even if it's not there anymore, like prioritizing yourself and your health is always more important. Um, and I also realized how important like reflection is. So I I thought about writing a blog when I started my whole like traveling plan thing,
Mhm.
but I decided against it just because I feel like my words weren't capturing the enormity and or the subtlety of my experience. And so a lot of it is in my head. And I think about a lot of the experiences, and I decided to document them using photography.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I did see that.
yeah, and so I think that's where I feel I document a lot of my growth because, well, number one, like I'm learning as I travel.
Mhm.
I'm taking pictures. It's not like me just going and not doing anything anywhere. I make it a point to take at least one good picture per place I go to. Um, and that really helps stimulate my mind and my creative side on one hand, but the other hand was also capturing things I was seeing around me while being like mindful and conscious of it.
Right. And
Um,
and like
yeah.
I know that the photography community is huge and stuff, and usually like I
Yeah.
follow a few on my Instagram and stuff, and I see that they post like a lot of different images and stuff. So that's very powerful to say like I like, try to choose one, that encapsulates that, and
Right.
obviously like there are like ethics that come with being responsible with your photography, so like
Oh,
going to
yeah.
different countries and immersing yourself into different cultures, obviously those
Mhm.
ethics can change depending on what's acceptable and what's not. Like how do you stay conscious of that? How do you stay up to date with all of those things?
Yeah. Well, I think it really can be summed up in this. If you want to learn about the culture of a country, observe the people like observe its norms surrounding photography. For example, when you're in Japan, I didn't realize this, but so I went to Japan a lot as a child. My name is Kato. I'm half Japanese,
Mhm.
FYI. And I don't like taking pictures of people close up. I really feel uncomfortable documenting someone in a very personal, private moment unless I know them. And I realize it comes from a cultural norm of not showing people's face when they're in a moment of vulnerability. And sometimes when people are walking in the street, that's when they're most vulnerable because they don't realize how many people are if they don't realize if anyone is watching them. Because most of the time you're distracted by something, your own thoughts, the place, you're thinking of a destination, stuff like that. And so like in Japan, you don't photograph people's face, and you can get into a lot of trouble for photographing someone without their consent. Whereas if you go to a country like the US, like people are just snapping pictures left and right. They don't really care, you know?
Right, as long as you're in a public place, it's fair game.
Right. Exactly. And so like when you go to like when I was in Egypt, a lot of people were taking pictures of the children, they were taking pictures of like just people like doing their everyday thing, and for me I felt uncomfortable with that. Yeah, and so like when I was another place, so I went on a tour in the Balkans. I didn't travel alone. Take no credit for that. I mean, I found the tour and some never mind details. But while we were traveling, there were people in our group who were taking pictures of the people who were begging on the street, and
Uh,
it was very, very uncomfortable. Like, how do you? And I have to be with these people 24, almost practically 24 hours for 2 weeks, mind, and like. How do you have that conversation with someone that, hey, that's extremely disrespectful what you're
mhm.
doing, and like really like infringing on their basic human right for privacy, you know?
Right. Yeah, and
It's
it's kind of like when folks go to like different countries, and I
mm-hmm.
think back, because I went to details. So I went to different countries and with some folks, and I'm guilty of this too to an extent, like
Mm-hmm.
taking pictures of the kids,
Right,
taking
yeah.
pictures of kids, giving
Yeah,
them
without
hugs and stuff
parental
like that.
consent, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, and it's
Or
like,
if you're in a position of power and then you're taking advantage of a community, yeah, it's
right, but
all
it
sorts
then
of ethical issues, right?
right, and where I'm kind of going with this though is like by posting on social media, it's like, hey, look at
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm helping out this community. Look at me. It's like,
Right,
you're benefiting from it. It's not the kids
right.
that are benefiting from it. Are you
Yeah,
taking a picture to post on social media, or are you taking a picture for memory? And while I
right,
don't have a problem with taking a picture of the community that you may be helping, I don't.
right,
I do have a problem with posting it on social media and
right,
bragging about it and clearly benefiting from it. You see what I'm saying? And
right. Yeah,
I think it's a huge issue. I know that some folks in the community call it like white savior syndrome. It's like, hey,
yeah.
I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
a different country to do my own
Right,
thing,
poverty
and
porn is another word
right,
for it.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, I don't know if those issues line up for with what you're saying, but I do think it's an issue.
Well,
Go ahead.
it does because when you're traveling, like you have to be mindful and respectful of the culture and the people and the environment, which I'll get to later. But
Yeah.
the big thing is sometimes, like, when you go to a place, they don't see it as disrespectful to take a picture of themselves. For example, like you go to a famous tourist location and they want you to take a picture because it kind of like puts them on a map.
Hmm.
Is one way of looking at it. However, you know as a person who is going to post this, and you're associating yourself and your ethics and your morality with your decision to post something online to your
Hmm.
community, to perhaps if you publicly post it to a wider community, perhaps the world, if you have that kind of influence. Um, you have to be really, really conscious of how this will impact them and how you are representing a group of people. Because that's a big thing, like,
Yeah.
if you are like, there are many photographers, oh my gosh, like I follow some on Instagram. I think I hope I don't botch her name, Christina Mittermeier. She's incredible. Oh, I love her
I gotta follow
photography.
her. Yeah,
Yeah,
send me
and
over her
she
handle after the episode later.
right.
Yeah.
I will. She does amazing thing, and she really highlights um native communities, like particularly in North America. At least I've seen a lot. She
Okay.
also travels around the world. So with Pacific Islander communities, like communities around the world, she works with them and she takes beautiful portraits and photographs of them and really highlight how beautiful their cult and significant their cultures are. You
Hmm.
know, and so when you take a photograph that empowers people, you know
Yeah.
that's when you shift the paradigm. You're not taking them a picture of them to show them as an exotic, inferior, like
Right.
far away third world community. You are
Well,
showing,
yeah.
like, yeah, like you are showing them at their most powerful, at their most bravest, or at their most vulnerable, but vulnerability with a strength behind them.
Yeah.
Because she also photographs communities that have been impacted by environmental damage,
Hmm.
climate change, and so she shows them fighting their fight to save their cultures and their communities, and like that's incredible, to use your platform to share a narrative,
Sure.
and like if you can do that, I feel a superpower. That's just
Yeah.
absolutely amazing if you can do that. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that, or they don't learn how to do that, because that's something you really have to develop with time. If you're not
Hmm.
like if you're not used to having those conversations with people, like what Humans of New York does, and how it takes like people and their stories and really puts it on a platform for people to empathize. Like some of these stories, like we would never, like if we heard about it from someone else, we would judge. But because it's on a platform that really encourages like listening and openness and mindfulness, you really learn to take the message, into your heart and really think about it.
Right. And I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of folks, they have different ways of expressing themselves. So while,
Mm-hmm.
photography may not be their thing, maybe it be writing or maybe it be
Yeah.
painting, but
Mm-hmm.
bottom line, I think everything that you just spoke to says that like art can be expressed in many different ways. It could be expressed
Yes.
in music, poetry, writing, like all of these different
Mm-hmm.
things. And it shows that photography, can tell a story in many, many different ways. And it does matter
Right.
what you capture in that image. So speaking of which, like in
Mm-hmm.
your images that you take when you travel, like what exactly are
Yes.
you trying to encapsulate? Like what do you want to tell the world with your stories through photography?
Okay, that's really rough because I've taken pictures of a lot of things. I guess um I take pictures of things that just, I don't know, something that captures my eye.
Yeah.
I love taking pictures of flowers because they always seem to be able to do that without fail. I love taking pictures of mountains. I love mountains.
Yeah.
You know
Mountains are
the
crazy
right.
awesome.
Yeah, and like even though they're, you know, ground pushed up, literally is all they are sometimes, or
Sure.
volcanic, sediment. But they they can be covered by so many things. They can be used for so many different like purposes. They're just like incredible things. So mountains are one big thing.
Yeah.
What else do I like? I like architecture is a big thing. Um, I I like taking. There's this one picture that I think of when you ask me like what I like taking pictures of. This
Uh-huh.
was a person working on. So there, I think it was in Sydney. Yes. So so the New South Wales Art Gallery, in Sydney. I was there, and they were setting up a new exhibition. I think for modern or contemporary art, and there was this person working on the wall. I'm not sure if that was the artwork, or that was just like part of the exhibit, like how they were going to set it up.
Hmm.
But I took a picture of them from the back and it's slightly towards the distance, so you can't really see who they are. But I love that, like the behind the scenes kind of picture.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
Let me
you
pull up
talked
my
about a lot.
Instagram.
What's up?
I'm gonna pull up my Instagram because I don't remember a lot of the pictures I've taken.
Oh no, that's fine. It because I wanted to transition to a lot that you said about like nature. So you're
Yeah.
saying like mountains
Mm-hmm.
and of the things of the sort. Like obviously, to take those pictures and stuff, you're going out into nature, and now we're
Mm-hmm.
kind of getting into the environment. So
Right.
we were just talking about ethics of taking pictures of people and and
Yes.
and 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 being respectful of their vulnerable space and their
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable moments. Like how do we be respectful of the environment when or how do you more so or how should
Mm-hmm.
we be respectful of the environment when we're venturing off into the unknown, into the wilderness, or to the environment when you do want to take pictures or just traveling regardless in general.
Right. Um, I think a lot of it is, I keep saying this word mindfulness. Um, Being conscious of like the small things that are going on around you, not just the big things.
Hmm.
And mindfulness plus a respect for nature. So when people go out, oftentimes they don't really think of nature as something that exists, but rather something that, um, stands between them and what they want to do. Um, Such as taking a never been Instagrammed picture, something unique, something that, will really be aesthetically pleasing. And so people want to venture off the what beaten track, and you want to take something new, never, like very unique. Anyway, when doing this, people like, okay, something Americans can relate to. California's bloom. Remember, there was this huge rain that led to the blooms happening all across, and they were really, really beautiful. But very quickly, because of how popular they became on social media, they were trampled on and destroyed.
Mm.
And so like that's the big thing when you go somewhere, making sure that you enjoying this experience doesn't damage the place itself and doesn't ruin it, not just for everyone else but for the things that live there. you know you
Right.
come and go. You are not permanent. You don't permanently belong in that space, but other things do. Other things rely on that environment, in that little section of the earth. They rely on that, and they need that. And we can go back to wherever it was we came from.
Yeah.
And
And I
so,
think, go ahead. Sorry.
right. And so, like, when someone sells you this experience, like companies can sell you like, hey, we're going to this place XX. You go to this XX location, and you destroy it, you ruin it, big thing. I really don't like this. Noise pollution. You are very loud and noisy, and like, I am a big what's the word? I do this a lot. I'm very loud when I'm around my friends. Pardon?
Is advocate the word that you're looking for?
No, no, no. I do this. Like, I'm noisy a lot.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm real
Okay.
loud. You know me, Carlos. You know me. I'm very loud. And so like I get really boisterous and stuff, but being like respectful of your of nature, and being quiet and not contributing to noise pollution and scaring off the beings that live there, you know? So
Yeah.
that's a big thing.
And
Right.
and I think thinking like you brought up California and stuff, and the last
Mm-hmm.
place that I went to that really blew me away was Yosemite National Park.
Uh-huh.
And I've never been so enamored in my life. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
like when I saw the Grand Canyon, maybe,
Right.
but going to Yosemite, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like how does something like this exist? And I was going
Mm-hmm.
around and taking pictures and stuff, and I was with
Right.
my entire family. We were all having a great time. We were walking on the path and things like that. But what I can admit is I never once thought that, hey, like maybe I shouldn't be making so much noise, or maybe I should be
Mm-hmm.
mindful of where I'm walking. Maybe where should I be
Right.
walking? What is the path? My immediately within my nature, or within
Mm-hmm.
what my habits are. um I want to see what is beyond the beaten path, and
Yeah.
and I didn't think at that point in time that maybe I shouldn't do this because of X reasons, not because it's against the rules, no, but more so
Right.
because other things are
You have a
dependent.
personal responsibility. Yeah.
Right. And so we
Right.
have the agency to be responsible with our choices
Mm-hmm.
in terms of our environment. And maybe because, there is a path that we should be set on, or maybe because
Right.
we shouldn't be climbing this rock, or maybe shouldn't be stepping here because maybe some wildlife, or maybe because it belongs to some habitat that depends on this
Yeah.
land. And all of that is
Mm-hmm.
very, very important. But one thing I didn't know about is noise pollution. And like,
Yeah.
how big of a problem is that? Because you mentioned that you're a
Oh.
loud person, but I'm notorious for being loud too. And so, like
Yeah.
how big of a problem is that, especially within national parks? And I'm speaking from an
Right.
American perspective, but even beyond, like some places that you've been
Mm-hmm.
to.
Yeah. So like noise and light are two big polluters that we don't really think about. Um, Noise can really damage a lot of environments, particularly places like national parks that aren't used to congestion or a lot of people. Um, Nature is also naturally noisy. Nature is not silent,
Hmm.
but it's the kind of noise you introduce. For example, shouting, sudden loud noises, um, like laughing suddenly because it's a high. Well, usually, it's more higher pitch.
Hmm.
Like certain noises that aren't naturally like at aren't at a natural level of noise. You know. and it can really like interfere with other species interacting. It can put a lot of things on edge, like with caves, for example. When you're in a cave and you're very loud, it travels. It's not just you, and the rocks are sensitive to noise. Everything is sensitive to noise, and it can damage the structure when you speak. And you produce a lot of carbon dioxide when you speak, which can also damage. I think we were in, I think Postoyna Caves is the name of the place.
And where was
And
that?
yes, it's in Slovenia.
Okay.
It's beautiful cave with the stalactites and the stalagmites, if that's how you say the word. I always butcher it up.
Same. I don't even remember off the top of my head right now.
Right. And so like beautiful, and these stalactites were formed like million. Like it takes so much time for these things to form, and they tell us, please be quiet, please be quiet. They keep repeating it, like, please be quiet, because when you speak, your voice and the carbon you produce damages the structures, the natural structures that exist. And that's something like when I was there, like I immediately shut my mouth, like I'm not going to be responsible for ruining like couple million year old cave. But there were people who really didn't care. They were
Right.
like, why can't I talk? I'm paying money to be here. Like the tour guide put me on this tour. Like, why should I be the one who's quiet? They are also oh, I hate that. They
Yeah.
are also
Entitled.
like, right. And just because they are also doing something doesn't mean you should. Just because they are also polluting doesn't mean you shouldn't pick up your own damn trash and keep it in your bag till you get to a rubbish
Seriously.
bin. Right.
And I think
And so,
that's like. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna ramble on like that.
Oh.
Grinds my gears.
Yeah, and I think that's like the most, I guess you could say, common form of pollution is just throwing your trash on the ground. Oh, by the way, I looked it up on Google. It's stalactite.
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 You know what? People know this. The thing that goes from the ceiling is with the C, and the thing that comes up from the ground is with the G.
Exactly.
You know what we're talking about?
Yeah, stalactite, stalagmite.
Yeah.
Gosh, I gotta go back and read a book or something. But yes, but yeah, back on topic. I guess like throwing your trash on the ground. I mean, obviously, like I feel like as a society, the message is out there. Don't litter. When you're going, especially when you're going
It's
out into the
2019.
wild. Yeah, and all you see on Facebook nowadays is the videos of the turtles with the six pack plastic ring around their necks. It's all really sad.
Yeah.
And I guess what for the viewers out there that may be curious on why that's important, like why should we be so like super extremely conscious if we're not going to be conscious about or not as conscious about noise pollution or venturing off the path? Why should we be the most sensitive, or as sensitive as the rest of the types of pollution, but especially with like with littering, picking up our trash, like what are some things
You're
that
asking me
we
like
should...
why we should be like conscious of that?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, so it's very simple. Whatever you do not put in your trash ends up in a water system most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like if you live in a place that right now Ohio is flooding, like all of the
Yes, it
trash
is.
that's on the ground gets picked up and gets moved to a water system. It could be Lake Erie, it could be a stream, it could be a river, it could be anything. It could be your water system where you are getting your water from, or where like another being relies on the water to, like, so many things rely on water. And when we litter, it just straight away goes to the ocean. And so people are like, oh, well, but if you put things in the trash, it goes to a landfill. But we can control landfills better. In a way, like it's not the best situation. And in fact, it's a horrible situation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a place we can monitor. It's a place that we can, like, cordon off from the rest of nature. We can try to do some damage control. It's like, okay, if all of your trash is on your bed versus lying all across your room, it's easier to then focus on cleaning your bed, like
Right.
rather than
Tell me
like
about it.
like and other than being completely lost, right? Exactly. Like I'm using like relatable examples.
Yeah.
Um, other than like if your trash is everywhere, you just feel overwhelmed. You know, you
Seriously.
can't walk around. You can't figure out where do you start. But if everything is in one place, you can start there. You know.
Amy, you're speaking truth right now. Yes.
Mm, I
Yes,
know.
you are.
But yeah, and so like when we litter, when we use more than we need to, when we don't refuse a straw, you know, that goes somewhere. And people say, "Oh, it's so simple," you know, like you just burn it. Well, where are you sending your trash to burn? Well, you're sending it to
Yeah.
my home. Like, if you are a Facebook friend of mine, you have seen countless videos. Like, I've been sharing constantly how countries like Canada, the United States is a big one, the UK, Australia, like Swedish countries are sending their trash to Malaysia, to other Southeast Asian countries for incineration. Like, you gotta be kidding me, right?
Yeah, and that's affecting
Right.
your airspace.
Yeah, and like there there are unethical, like our environmental minister said it right. They're traders to the country. These traders are bringing trash, importing trash into our community, setting up plants where they don't have permits or the proper like procedures and equipments to burn these like containers, like shipping containers worth of trash. So many shipping containers worth of trash, they're burning it in our communities, and people are coughing up blood. People are getting very, very, very sick because the chemicals that are let off when things like plastics are burnt, it's poisonous. It's all poison,
Yeah.
you know. And
And
then there are plants that are like letting some of that waste, like the runoff, toxic runoff, go into the rivers, and we rely on our rivers for water. Like Malaysia doesn't really like our water sources are almost very direct. At least that's what I think. I have to check. If you're curious, read up on our water system. But a
sure.
lot of people got poisoned from the water because our treatment plants don't have the capacity to clean out that kind of stuff. You know, you can
Yeah.
only clean out what you know, right?
And yeah, and I feel like, this is all like I don't want to say like new to me, but it's
Mhm.
hard for me to imagine like people suffering so much from
Mhm.
from this pollution.
Right.
It doesn't happen on the scale as much here, like even in
Well,
Cleveland,
well,
but
this is the thing um, because wait, because Americans do not want to see it, because Canadians and Australians and all these people don't want to see it, they send it somewhere else.
mhm.
They have the capacity to send it somewhere else. Take it out of this world. You know, you send it to a third world country, a
Right.
developing nation. You don't have to think about your trash. Someone else will deal with it. You know,
Yeah, and I think of
we
like
like,
the big
you know what?
ships that take all that trash.
Right. And imagine like the oil that's consumed, like your trash has traveled more than you will ever travel in your lifetime. How
Hmm.
do you feel about that? You know,
Yeah, and
like
you know what? I
when
just
I
had
was
a
in the right, when I was in the US, my plastic trash went home more than me.
wow.
Yeah. Think
And
like
I just
just
had like
like
a little mini flashback. Like, what is the solution? And I just had a
well,
flashback to somebody speaking about like, um, you know, uh, uh, converting trash into energy. And
yeah.
supposedly that Sweden's doing this thing. But like, how realistic is that? Like, is
It's
that actually happening? Like, what is a solution? If we
right.
can't be, sending. I don't think we should be burning our trash at all because it affects the ozone layer. Obviously, we're dealing with
Right, right.
with climate change. We're dealing with preserving our atmosphere. Like that is something that
Mhm.
is extreme, and it affects us all as a planet. And if we're not
Right.
worried about any other social issues, that is the one. Or not. It's not even a
Yes.
social issue. I mean, it can be,
Right.
but as it is
It's
an
no.
issue, like
Right.
that
It is
is
a
what we should be
humanitarian
worried about,
crisis. That's the
regardless.
phrase you're
Like what
looking for.
What's
It's
up?
a humanitarian crisis.
Exactly. Yes, it is a
Yeah.
humanitarian crisis, so that's why I don't even feel like we should be burning our trash. But what is the
Right.
solution? Like, if Sweden is actually turning trash into energy,
Right.
I can't imagine that being the only solution. But what is a
So
solid solution? Like, what do we do?
right. So it's multi-layered, as all solutions are. The
Mhm.
first most basic thing is to reduce. You know,
Yeah.
reduce and refuse. They are adding an R to the three R's. Reduce and refuse. You as a consumer have the choice to refuse something. For example, carrying a glass Tupperware with you. Glass container, not Tupperware. Tupperware is a brand. Sorry, trademark. Sorry, people at
Is it
Tupperware.
really?
Yeah, it is actually. It's a
What?
brand.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
shook, right?
We're not
Um,
endorsed. We are not
yeah.
endorsed by Tupperware.
So taking a glass container with you or a mason jar with you when you go somewhere, so you can put leftovers inside that instead of taking plastic and styrofoam containers. Simple.
Uh-huh.
Refusing a straw, or carrying a metal straw with you, or carrying paper straws with you. I personally prefer the metal ones, but it's personal preference, and a lot of people in the disability advocacy communities and committees, they are talking about how lack of like straws are needed for consumption of fluids and food by
Right.
many
And some countries are
communities.
like banning
Right.
straws.
Right, exactly. And so, like, finding all other solutions, like having grass straws, like there are reeds and weeds that are hollow inside, and so like use them as an alternative, and it doesn't hurt people who use them like metal straws do. So like there's so many solutions on that level, and I'll come back to that in a bit because I want to address the second part first.
Uh-huh.
But I'll talk about like as a consumer and talking about how do I afford to do that. That's one thing, but I'll come back to that. The second part of the solution is you can recycle sustainably. You can melt plastic down sustainably. There is a way to do that without harming the environment. The only thing is who is absorbing the cost. The reason why the trash is being shipped overseas is because it's cheaper. That's the only reason. It's
Mhm.
not that people need the space. It's not that people like America has been posting on its recycling, like on different recycling communities that I'm part of. They're talking about how, oh, it's too expensive to recycle. I'm like,
Yeah.
like words that people over 18 can use like so many times. Like
And
what is this
that's something like I'm
nonsense?
unpacking too. Like it always comes
Right.
down to the dollar. And I'm seeing it
Yeah.
every day.
Right.
People always have like the people that say, "Oh, we're coming up with excuses." Well, their primary excuse is it always comes down to the dollar. Oh, we can't
Right.
help out this community because it's too expensive or it's too
Right.
risky because I might lose
Yes.
money or our
Right.
economy relies so much on like what? People are
Yeah, it's like
dying. Like
yeah. And but this is the other thing. Like what I don't understand is overall it's better for you because it creates jobs in the community when you have recycling centers. You need people to sort it, you need people to do all these things. The only thing is it's dirty work, you know?
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
dirty, messy, dangerous work. And that work is often relegated to people who are at the lowest of the low in society.
hmm
And do you
Especially
want
in a
people at the
capitalistic society, for
right,
sure.
exactly. And do you want like it's all about the like, the title. Oh, you collect trash? Like that's for me, collecting trash is one of the most noble jobs you can do because you are risking your life every day doing that.
Yeah.
Compared to working in an office, like no, that's nonsense.
hmm
Um so like when you bring recycling into the conversation, then you add the added layer of, well, this is trash as well, but it's expensive. So people are making money off of this. Who is that money going to? Who's working in these plants? Do you need like extra skills to work in this industry, in this sector of the industry, waste industry? And why is it so expensive? you
Right.
know?
And I feel like
And
that's
so,
why it takes so long for especially
right.
this country, like the United
Yeah.
States. It takes so long to make a decision when we're trying to come up to a
Yes.
solution because people are worried
Right.
about, like I just
Yeah.
said, it always comes down to the dollar. Like, okay,
Right.
why are we losing so much money? Are we going to lose too much
Mhm.
money? If we're losing too much money, then it's not worth it. Not only that,
Right.
but am I making money? Who's going to be
Right.
making the money?
Oh,
Am I making
so
enough money?
yes. So like another big thing as part of this podcast is supposed to be about traveling and the environment. I'm so sorry to the listeners. We've gotten a bit off track. But very important. We're getting back on track here. So part of it is how do you get from point A to point B, right? And how much oil are you using? How much energy? What kind of like what pollutants are you releasing back into the environment? Like a lot of those things are really part of your decision to travel. Um, do you carbon offset and all of that stuff? But one of the solutions that people are really proposing for intercountry, as long as you're connected by some land or only like a little bit of water separating you, or if it's like within a really big nation like the United States, or within groups of countries that are already connected like the EU, using high speed rail has been a really, really big solution that's been proposed and implemented in many countries. But
Mhm.
the reason there, well, the big reason why it's not big in the United States is because of the car and airplane lobby. But in addition to that, you have people who want to make a dollar, and other countries, like, yes, most countries built their high speed rail really when their societies were usually like post destructive era. Like Japan built it after World War II. So a lot of things hadn't been built back up, and people really um want, like, you could see the benefit of having something like this. When I posted on a forum, very like I don't know what to call them. I just say a forum, social justice topics forum.
Uh-huh.
Um, I posted on there like, you know, this should be a whole nationwide effort. This is not the effort of just the government fighting against the people and corporations to enact this. No, everyone has to work together to have something like this. In the United States, traveling, imagine 3.5 hours from New York to Chicago. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And being able
I
to
know
do
that
this,
there's
like,
some efforts. Yeah, I know
right.
there's some efforts going on here in Cleveland. Like I think they're trying to. I forgot what it was
Yep.
called, like the hyperrail or something. But
Yeah, and so
um,
yeah. Um but the problem is that in California they wanted to do something between, I believe, oh gosh, I'm gonna mess this up. Okay, North and South California. They wanted to do like a high speed rail network. I can't
mhm.
remember the exact locations, escaping my mind. But they wanted to do that, and it's costing like, I think 700 million, 70 million, I don't know, many, 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 many millions of
It's a lot
dollars
of
to do
money.
this, right? And see if I can pull it up actually. But the problem is that they have to buy land from private owners, landowners. They have
Mhm.
to work with corporations and stuff. And I commented. I said, well, like, everyone has to work together. The other thing is, people can't be making money off of this project. And oh my gosh, the abuse I got online. Wow. Like, they were saying, how can you not make a dollar out of it? Like, people need to eat. And I'm like, number one, you're not running a business properly if you don't include salaries, wages, and all of that stuff, getting people paid
Mhm.
under your overhead, like your cost, you know?
Right.
Like, I think people often conflate cost, like profit and income. Do you get
Yeah. Yeah,
what
I
I'm
do.
trying to say?
I
Like,
do get what you're saying. Yeah,
right,
because
usually profits, if they're divided in a company, are divided as bonuses. They're
mhm.
not divided as people's incomes. But people who don't have that much money, or who are not familiar with finance and how companies and organizations are run, unfortunately conflate the two. And so like, people see it as uh, a short-term barrier. It's too expensive now, right? It's
Hmm.
always about the now. I feel like that's like, for all that I feel like a lot of it's like me trashing the United States. Like, sorry, people in the US, there are a lot of problems in the country. I love it, but there are problems. And you need to recognize them in order to grow. But anyway, a big problem with American politics and American government and just American civil society is that people always focus on the short term impact rather than the long term benefit.
Right.
So,
And that it's
yeah,
such a problem too, because like I was saying before, like even like in our Congress, I mean,
yeah,
I don't know how accurate it is to say that
mm-hmm,
Congress directly reflects our society. I think it's accurate in some ways, but inaccurate in different ways. But that's
mm,
not the point.
yeah,
It's the fact that like it takes so long just to come up with a common solution because we're so divided on whether or not the
yeah,
private sector should be handling this or the public sector should be handling this. My bias
yeah,
or my angle is that the public sector should be handling this. Like we as a
yeah,
society need to be making the decisions
right,
about what goes on. I can't
yeah,
necessarily trust a corporation that goes out and says, "Oh, look at me, I'm environmentally friendly for Earth Week or Earth Day," and then I'm just going
yeah,
to forget about it. I think going
yeah.
back to your point on,
it's like
we
it's
all
like
need
the
to work
companies.
together.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm saying
It's like
like
the
we all need to work
yeah.
together, in terms of being smart consumers, conscious consumers on what
Mm-hmm.
exactly what we're doing, on what we're consuming with our dollars.
Yeah.
Um, and how exactly does that affects the environment, by
Yeah.
choosing not to purchase a certain thing that we know is going to pollute our environment in some way over something that may not as much, is being
Right.
responsible. It reminds me, it kind of takes me back to when I was at PAX,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to this panel. It was called like being a smart or so like social. It was like a meme. It was a meme. It was
Mm-hmm.
gritty. Gritty is a socialist, being a responsible consumer in a capitalist
Right.
society, within with the context of nerd culture. And
Right.
so one of the points that someone
Because you want
made,
the merch, right?
right, yeah, with all the merch, and
Right.
one of the points that someone made up there, I don't remember who it was. I'm sorry if you're listening to this, but like someone said, um spoilers, if you're going out and watching a movie, spoilers
Mm.
are classist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so making that choice to not go on your social media and spoil a movie for somebody or spoil a video
Right.
game, because you had the privilege to have access to something over somebody else, is making a
Right.
difference. So
Yeah.
I think that same philosophy can be applied to our dollars
Mm-hmm.
and our consumption habits, because
Right.
overall that is what's going to happen. And one last point before we move on from this, when I
Mm-hmm.
think about, because everything I just said just reminded me about veganism, and
Yeah.
I have my gripes with it. Sometimes I like to say that, veganism is inaccessible, but the
Mm-hmm.
overall sentiment on why I
In the
feel
US.
in the US, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm speaking from the context of being born here and living my entire life
Right.
here, so but the overall sentiment of saying, I'm rebelling against a corporate society that abuses these animals and makes
Mm-hmm.
and it has the potential to make us sick. I can't argue against that. Saying I respect it.
Mm-hmm.
How much
Right.
is it going to work? I don't know, because I do
Yeah.
believe that policy or evolution, is going to make a difference. You see what I'm saying? I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that overall sentiment of refusing and being
Right.
conscious of our actions is going to make that difference. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Mm-hmm. Well, oh, by the way, side note, I did Google it, and the California High Speed Rail Authority, according to a bunch of sources, the cost is like $77 billion,
Wow.
which is ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, I get what you're trying to like what you are saying. Um, I think that leads me kind of to my next point,
Uh-huh.
which is the choices you make. The individual choices we all make, as well as our larger how that impacts our larger decisions. What I think 100 companies are responsible for like more than 75% of the pollution on this planet, and we like to see ourselves as very removed from that.
Hmm.
Those are corporations, those are the people, like they them, like those people. um but we don't realize that our consumption habits directly impact that. A big way is oil.
Okay.
People, I feel, have dissociated plastic and oil, even though plastic is derived from oil.
Okay. Yeah, seriously, I didn't think
Yeah,
about that once.
right. Yeah, and so like for example, people who don't buy like um animal leather
Yeah.
and choose to buy like faux leather that's plastic based, well, you're still like using oil based products,
Mm,
you know, and you're impacting the planet. Oftentimes, not always, those products don't last as long. So you need to buy more. You need to buy more and more and more and more. And, you know, you're consuming a lot. And when you get rid of something, where do you send it? You know? And so all of those individual choices, like choosing to eat a very rare fungus, mushroom, whatever, you know, instead of meat, but having that be environmentally unsustainable, you know, like for the community. You know, you're
yeah.
not eating according to what your community can produce. America is overproducing so that it can meet the wants of everyone, you know?
Yeah.
And
And
so, like,
yeah, there's so
right.
many
And
layers to this.
right, it's such a complex issue, which is why you keep it simple. Respect your planet. When you respect something, you think about how your decisions impact it. When
Hmm.
you respect your friend, when you respect your neighbor, you respect your family, you like whoever it is you think about. Think about the earth as a person, your environment as people, you know? Because we
Right.
consider corporations people. Why can't we consider our environment the same way? You
Seriously,
know,
even
like
on
people,
paper, we
we,
consider them as
right,
people.
exact in the law, black print law, we consider them people. You know, they are human. We used to name every single mountain, you know? Every place has a story. Like every place that has ever been inhabited by people has names, has identifiers, has markers because we recognize it as something that we need to survive, you know?
Yeah.
And once we have that mentality that when you use something that you don't need, right? You're taking it away. Like it's like plucking a strand of hair every time you pass by a person. That person gonna be bald real soon, you know?
Yeah.
And then you look at them, you'll be like, oh, what happened? But you don't realize you'd been snagging hairs off their head for the whole time, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's like something small, like over. You don't immediately notice it, you know. It's like
Hmm.
um,
I
it's
can
like
think of
growing.
an
Yeah,
analogy.
right. It's like growing your hair out. You don't realize how long it is until someone points it out, or like you really take a good look at yourself.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
there was an analogy that I thought of. I just wow, I'm having all these flashbacks today. It was a flashback, I think it was to like elementary school, and we're talking about
Hmm.
heat, but it kind of has to do with that.
Hmm.
So I know we were just talking about respecting the environment, but this is just something my teacher told me a while ago. So it was
Right.
say you take a frog, right?
Right.
And you put a frog into some water, right?
Hot water. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So like,
Yeah.
the frog is in the hot water and then you turn on the heater. The frog is not going to
Hmm.
jump out immediately, it's going to stay
Right.
in there until it's like, "Oh wait, hold up. This is not bearable." And then it jumps out of the water. Compared
Right.
to
But by
you put the cup in there and then it boils and
yeah.
then you throw a frog into it, they're going to immediately jump out.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like that short-term versus long-term thing I think that you were saying.
Right. The immediate like the shock. And I think that's what you really see when you travel. Because like when you travel to a place, you're seeing it with fresh eyes. You've never been there before. You know, maybe you have a comparison with a really beautiful picture someone took one day, maybe many, many years ago, or maybe when a place was just recently cleaned. But like, one example, we were traveling in Jordan. Jordan is a beautiful place. Um, we were in the car, we were driving past these fields, and I noticed something in the trees. And I was like, is that flower? Is that like weird leaves? Like what the hell is that? I have no idea what it is. So I was like just staring out of the window trying to look more closely because we were moving pretty fast. Try to look more closely and I realized those are plastic bags. Those are
Huh.
plastic bags having hanging off every single tree in like many, many fields, kilometers worth of field. You know? We're
Yeah.
driving because of this, and it broke my heart. And the excuse people give is, oh, well, it's like the refugee camps, they're littering, they're polluting. I'm like, no, it's not that, because why do they have to carry their stuff in plastic bags? Because they have nothing. They need to
Yeah.
put their they need to put their stuff somewhere, you know?
You're
Like they
fine.
need something to carry. Like, right. Yeah. I have a problem with cussing.
You are
But
all good. Seriously,
yeah.
that's fine.
But yeah, like, so people need to carry their things. People need something. The most easiest thing to carry your stuff in is plastic. If you are given the option to use something else, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And so it's easy to blame the people who are the poorest, who are the least like privileged in our society for our problem. People like to say, oh, well, Southeast Asia pollutes a lot. We create a lot of, yes, we do. Why? How much power do we have over the packaging that is used for all the products that we need? Right? How much influence do we have over corporations that are based more than 9,000 miles away? Why are we being held responsible for the actions and decisions that are made by people who are making money off of us needing those items? It's easy for someone to boycott Nestle when they live in Europe. But how do you boycott Nestle when it makes like everything from baby formula to like almost everything you eat in Southeast Asia?
Mm-hmm.
You make a society dependent on the product, and then you just like demonize us for using it. Like why, like Dove makes all those love yourself campaigns in the West, but sells whitening cream in Asia and Africa.
Oh, jeez.
Like it's stuff like that. And like once you realize how much agency you have, no matter where you are on this planet, you can like make a fuss. You do that thing where someone orders, like when you order something and they send the wrong food. You know how angry people get?
Yeah.
I wish they got that angry, like all those what Debbie's and Susans. I wish they got that angry, That would be
Let me
epic,
speak to
so
your
epic.
manager.
Right? Yes. Oh my god, that would be so awesome. I would love that if everyone got that mad when they got the wrong food.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I hope people get that mad. Like
For
I'm
sure.
grinning ear to ear imagining that situation right now. So awesome, awesome things that are happening. There are many, many cities that build in botanic parks into their landscape. So like Melbourne has a beautiful park right next to the city. It's really quiet space too, and it's free. Same with Sydney. And Wellington, oh my gosh, new favorite city. Well, one of my top 5 favorite cities. Very, very pedestrian friendly, very, very public transport based. Very like the hill right next to the city is a huge park, and
Mm-hmm.
it's right by the water, and like you don't see litter. People pick up their trash, and it's such a happy city because of that. You don't feel the pollution because most of it is offset somehow, by the environment. Of course, people can point out problems, but I think that there's so many cities in this world right now making an effort to really become green. And it's
Let's talk about
incredible.
that for a second,
Yeah.
because I'm seriously actually interested in that. Like green
Mhm.
cities.
Yes.
How does that work?
So the big thing, big thing is reducing personal transportation and relying on public transportation,
Uh-huh.
walking and biking. Cycling, big thing because, it's very simple. You reduce the amount of carbon you use. Because if one family uses 2 cars versus every family member sharing the public transportation with everyone else, it's totally different. And it's not making anything like Uber or Lyft. Those things are actually shown to be more detrimental to the environment because
Oh, wow.
people choose to take individual rides rather than carpooling or taking the public transport because they're like, oh, well, it's easier to just call to where I am or call it to where I am, you know?
Yeah.
So using those ride share companies, I probably shouldn't use. You can bleep the corporations out. Ride share companies,
Uh-huh.
and so like you're not sharing those rides unless you're pooling, you know. And so like making a place very bike friendly. People love biking, you know. A lot of I can. It's a very embarrassing thing. I cannot ride a bike, but you know, like you go to different places and they have free bikes that everyone can use, or places where you can walk everywhere. That's an incredibly beautiful thing, where you can walk and really appreciate your environment, and you also notice it's not as dusty, you know,
Yeah.
because you're not like being like hit in the face with like exhaust fumes, you know. And just like the but the big strong backbone to any green city is public transportation, you know,
Yeah.
accessible public transportation, affordable public transportation.
And shout out to
um
the transportation community, because I know y'all are really
right.
doing some stuff out there. And while I may not be as educated as you guys, like seriously, like I just want to speak to those folks that are trying to do that here in my current county. Like, transportation is such an issue. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if people don't have access to transportation, it could be as simple as this. You made a
Right.
point. Let's keep it simple. People can't get to work, and if people can't
Yeah.
get to work, they're not making any money. And and
Right.
and and it goes back to that whole inaccessibility thing. If people want to live a
Right.
healthy lifestyle, well, healthy, quote, healthy things are sold at a premium here in the United States compared to
Yes.
like a dollar liter of Coke, and
Right.
so health plays a
It's
big
like,
part in being
yeah.
environmentally friendly, you know?
Right. It's like Coca-Cola is $1, and then water is $1.20.
Yeah, like little stuff
Yeah.
like that, but it makes a difference. It does.
Right, right. Yeah, because it's like a barrier for many people. And so like going to one beautiful thing you see when you travel is like how other people and other societies are really approaching the issue of climate change, of environmental degradation.
Yes, I
You
do
know,
want to
it's
know
like
about that. Yeah.
it's when I go to Thailand, it's incredible. Like you can see people really like encouraging people to not litter, because when people go on holiday, often they turn off the part of their brain that's responsible for some reason, and like they just like treat that place awful. You know, like you would not do that at home. Why are you doing it here? You know, but
So
like
let's spend a little
yeah,
time on that too, because I mean, like,
right,
let's admit it, it's gonna be a longer episode. It's really we're so, but I'm sure there's a lot to unpack here. So like,
right.
let's spend a little time on that. Like, tell me a little bit
Hmm.
about Thailand, but like maybe some other countries too that are being environmentally friendly. Like, what are some positive examples that you see that we could all learn from, or other nations can learn from?
Yeah. So my big three, I think like gold star so far. New Zealand, Australia, and Thailand. Of course, New Zealand and Australia are both guilty for shipping their trash overseas. But I would like to add that not but and there are local efforts to really like do something about that. You know,
Uh-huh.
like when I was in Wellington, my souvenir there was actually a smoothie mug. So it was like a big mason jar, and I just found a random store, and I really wanted to have a smoothie, and they gave this mug to me, and they said come back and we'll give you like return like 50 cents back for the mug.
Hmm.
You know, and so like it encouraged people to go back and return the mug, or you can keep it and reuse it. That's what I'm doing, you know, because I like that was a really good quality mug. It wasn't like something that people can just like whatever,
Right.
I'm not going to deal with it. No, like I loved it. I took it, I carry it with me today whenever I go to the store, and I just, don't use um that, And so like those small things that different local companies are doing, it's really incredible. In Australia, same thing, like reducing the amount of containers, plastic, no styro. I don't see styrofoam very often. I only saw it when I went to the US, which really
Uh-huh.
like threw me off. Um,
Huh. Really?
like when I see styrofoam, it's actually jarring because I don't see it like much here or other places anymore. People
Yeah.
use paper. People use other things. They don't use like they use those environmentally friendly plastics, which I still have a problem with because they still do have some oil product in them. So
Right.
paper really is the best option. And then like Thailand's a big one because you see them on the news a lot, with like really big pushes for environmental conservation. Um, they have really started telling tourists, hey, you know what? If you can't respect this place, you shouldn't come here, you know? And it relies on tourism, but it's still making that stand. And it's making it easier for the tourists by offering alternatives. They're not saying like, hey, cold turkey, but hey, here's something else you can use. If you're not if since we don't want you to use plastic, here, use something else, you know?
Yes,
And
and I,
like,
I saw something on social media too. I don't remember what country it was, but like a country, I think it's in the Southeast Asian region or the Asian region or I don't know what region. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll look
uh-huh,
it up. But like instead of using plastic bags, to wrap vegetables, they're like banana
that was
leaf.
Thailand.
Was it
Mm-hmm.
Thailand? Okay, I thought it
They
was.
use banana leaves to wrap it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was Thailand. Yep.
And the
They're
little stuff
doing a
like that
lot.
does make a
Yeah.
difference because like if institutions start doing things, you cover a whole base a lot faster than an individual. That's not to say that the
Right.
individual isn't responsible, but institutions
Right.
are too.
Yes. Yeah. And so like those usually are more local grocers. I'm not sure
Uh-huh.
if it's a big grocer. But it's still a company. It's still impacting a community, And so like what is that country's relationship with the environment? That's a big thing. Like I notice there are many countries where our culture is very deeply rooted in the respect for our environment. So you'll see like a lot of hiking trails, walking trails, um, just like things built in and around nature because
Hmm.
it's so important to that culture. Or it's something that like health and environmental consciousness is so ingrained into the new culture. Like in Australia, when I was there, I did some of the most walking I've ever done in my life
Oh wow.
because my
Yeah.
friends like to hike. Well, one friend loves to hike, and she and her friends took me to Plenty Gorge Park, which is like almost like a national park that's in the middle of a suburb.
Hmm.
Right, mind blowing for me. And it was just amazing because we were just walking, and suddenly there were like, I think about, maybe I'm exaggerating, 100 kangaroos just like there. I was so scared, but like that's right in the middle of the suburb, but they belong there. No one's showing them. That's their land,
Uh-huh.
you know. And that was like pretty awesome to see, and it's protected and it's like gated off. We couldn't get in. Like we were walking around, like we walked a lot trying to figure out how to get in rather than like actually being in the park.
Right.
And so like you protect these parks, you protect the area, and when you realize that someone is like not appreciating what you are giving them, which is access to this space, you take it away. You take away that person's right to come to a place because they are not respecting the sanctity of the environment.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds very exclusionary.
Yeah.
But in a way, like, oh, it's so weird for me to be saying this. Not everyone deserves to be everywhere.
Yeah.
If you do not
Yeah.
respect a person, like if I don't mind if you disagree with me as long as you don't as long as you don't disrespect or disregard the basic human sanctity, right? Of the
Yes,
other
and I'm
of the
totally
people
with
I
that.
care about, right? And so, like, if you take that and add the environment to that, I don't mind you disagreeing with me as long as you don't disregard the basic, like having basic respect for the people and the environment.
Right.
You know,
Right.
And
And it comes down to principles. It's like if you have no
right,
principles, then of course, like you could say something
yeah,
completely off the wall and say, "Oh, well, yeah, I just disrespected you. Yeah, we could just move on from
right,
it." Like
right.
no,
We
like
agree
people
to
have to
disagree.
have
No, we are not
principles.
agree to disagree. You're gonna mess this place up if we agree to disagree. Like
Right.
if you think a very centrist, oh, this upcoming elections is gonna be fun because
Oh my
like environment
God.
is a big
Yeah.
topic. Are you gonna be a middle person and say we'll figure this out? No, you have to have a basic like bottom line. What are you going to fight for? What are you going to go like crazy eyed and like wild hair going to go
Right.
in, and fight for this? The
And
environment should be the basic thing,
for
you know?
sure. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and it comes down to it too because, environmentalism is such a complex
Mm-hmm.
you could say issue or what's the word? I don't know. But environmentalism is
Right.
complex. And so
Yes.
there's so many layers. There's environmental racism. That's something that
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in. I'm going to read more
Yeah.
about before I start talking about it. But, the fact that racism plays a part in environmentalism, or it's a social issue that stems from it. it,
Right.
it in the age of social media where I can make a show like this and publish
Mm-hmm.
it, and where you can come onto the show and say what you need to say and have so many people listen to it at the same time, of course people are going to get crazy eyed and come out about what has
Right.
been affecting them for ages,
Right.
compared to so long ago where the
Mm-hmm.
folks who had the largest voice, or still do to this day, but had the larger voice back then, that may
Right.
not have been suffering from these issues back then,
Mm-hmm.
where someone can be like, "Oh, well, this election is going to be fun, we'll just agree to disagree because, the issues don't affect them as much,
Right.
people are not
They don't
dying in their
realize like
communities."
foreign policy includes environmental waste.
Yeah.
Foreign policy includes trade that impacts the environment. Foreign policy includes like, hey, where are you gonna put your next military base? Like the Galapagos Islands? Really?
Mm,
Really?
mhm.
Like you're gonna do that?
I think about
Like
Guam too, and I think about
yeah,
Hawaii. Like the story
right.
of Hawaii is like I was listening to, shout out to Code Switch, by the way, which was a massive inspiration on this role, but or this
Mhm.
show, on why it even exists. But I was listening to an episode of Code Switch, which is a podcast on NPR, very much, like this show, but they were interviewing
Right.
somebody from Hawaii, and he was telling like the story about Hawaii and how it was colonized, and
Yeah.
how
Oh, I was shook when I heard about it.
yeah, and it's like it's super sad because we
Right.
don't hear about these things. In
Mm-hmm.
American society, we don't. Americans who are born into this education system where, maybe we'll spend a day or two or a week talking about, and then we'll forget about it and move on with our studies about
Right.
different. It's like it's almost impossible to keep up with it until we
Yeah.
get to a point where we have to dive deep. And I think that's the
Yeah.
challenge with environmentalism, is that we don't have access to the materials at a young age, or even if we do, we don't care about it enough. We don't know the urgency because we don't live it. Or maybe
Right.
we do,
And
but we keep our hands over our eyes, our hands over our ears
mm-hmm.
to it.
Right. And also keep in mind, people in the United States don't realize that a lot of your environmental policy, not just policy, but I guess curriculum, that's the word I'm looking for.
Hmm.
When you think of your American curriculum and you think about what you're studying and you think about what you're learning and what like you feel like you only get so much out of it, you export that curriculum around the world.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
there's like the idea was promoted for so long. America is incredible, our education system is the best in the world. The UK is incredible, the education system is best in the world. Like all these places, and then we're like, okay, since you're the best, let's see what you're learning, and we adopt these education systems and practices and curriculums, and we don't learn about our own country. I growing up, I knew more about Greek, Roman, and British history than I did my own. And so like, what does that say about the environment? We learn about the geographies of other countries and the landscapes and the climates of other places that are so far removed from home. You
Hmm.
know, we only really know a lot about home because we live here. That's the big difference. You know, you see your climate, you experience climate change differently. At least in Malaysia, it's more in your face. You know, I mean, it's very in your face in the US, but I don't know why people just ignore it. But yeah.
So I
Yeah.
do. We have to wrap up the episode
Yes.
because but like that's not to say that this episode wasn't awesome. Seriously.
Oh,
And
thanks.
so, to the listeners out there who have stuck through this, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Because
Yeah.
Amy's always bringing the heat, with what she has to say, and she'll be definitely on the show going here forward. Now, if you remember, in the first iteration, I asked every guest this question.
Mhm.
What is something? What if you had to say one last thing?
Oh
About
God.
this topic. Like, what do you want to say? Or maybe it doesn't even have to be about the topic. Like, what's something that you want to shout out to the world?
Find what you want to do. Find something that really makes you happy. It doesn't have to be your hustle. It doesn't have to be anything you need to make money from. Find that thing, cherish it, and make sure that while you're doing it, you try to empower and improve the community that you belong to and the communities that you visit. Take what you love and make other people understand why it's valuable, but don't do it at the detriment of those around you and the environment you belong to. Yeah, that's
Awesome.
it.
Cool. So thank you everyone for so much for listening. When you listen to this, you'll definitely see it we're available on YouTube now, Facebook, Spotify, Apple, Google Play Music, and Podbean. Working on getting on more platforms, but those are the ones that are the most demand. So if you want to see it on somewhere else, hit me up. You know where to find me. And where can people find you, Amy? I mean, I know you mentioned that you had an Instagram where you post your pictures and stuff like that. Did you want to put that out there? Or?
I mean, yeah, sure. Wait, I don't remember my. Oh shoot. Let me find my handle. Okay, so it's Amy AMY .I.K.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
So if you
I'll
didn't
send
take
it to
that
you as
down,
well.
or
Right.
oh yeah, go ahead and send it to me. And if you didn't take that down, definitely check out the video description. The video description will have all of our handles there. You can follow us. Send the show an email if you have any questions for Amy or anything like that. And you'll definitely see her on the show soon. So thank you again, everyone, for listening, and I hope you join us for the next one. All right, thank you. Peace out.